We got Sid? All right. There he is. Sid, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. Glad we got all that technology worked out there.
Well, technology and I are not well acquainted, so I'm always glad when it works.
Awesome. Well, appreciate you joining us. Wanted to have you on to kind of give us your feelings about the present political climate here in the state of Mississippi, and in particular, these Medicaid expansion initiative that looks like it's just been put on ice by those that are organizing that. And of course, you're well aware that the medical marijuana initiative recently struck down by the Supreme Court. What's happening there, and where do we go from here? How do you see it?
Well, I think that the legislature, through no immediate fault of their own, maybe some long-term fault, is in a position that is not going to be easy to get out of. In the Fordyce era, we resumed about a century-old right of initiative and referendum, and the state had offered that to the citizens over a century ago. Fits and starts. The Supreme Court canceled it. They brought it back. Governor Fordyce was able to make it a pretty significant issue in his race of citizen initiatives, and so for good or ill, the public got used to having that right. And of course, several things got on the ballot over the years. Some passed, most failed. Out of 60 some odd initiatives, you got like 5, 6 that ultimately passed. And so with medical marijuana, in the gold buckle of the Bible Belt, one would never think that a marijuana bill was going to be successful. 73% of the voters said yes, they wanted that, and I think it was a very emotional thing. And as a cancer survivor, I get it. They've got relatives, loved ones who are suffering from dread disease and dealing with issues, and medical marijuana at first blush sounds like a good alternative, but there are a lot of unintended consequences. And so at any rate, the INR process is effectively blown up by the Supreme Court decision. Not only does it impact the medical marijuana situation, but it does impact Medicaid expansion.
Right.
Talking off the record to leaders in the legislature, I think most of them were prepared prior to the Supreme Court decision to have to do something on Medicaid expansion or run the risk of a well-financed campaign like the medical marijuana push, implementing some form of Medicaid expansion that the legislature didn't have control of. So I think they were all geared up and prepared to have to deal with the issue, but this has come along. Now, the question, I think, Gerard, is does the legislature feel the impetus to repair and replace the initiative process? Obviously you could
We got Sid Salter is our guest. All right, so Sid, continue, please. You were just talking about where you see the legislature going with this and what their expectation was, and there doesn't seem to be a receptive attitude, shall we say, in general towards expanding Medicaid, thus the effort to establish a petition-based initiative. I think the Mississippi Hospital Association was a key player there, and other parties as well. So where do you see that going here?
Well, as I was saying before the break, the legislature prior to this decision felt like they may have to deal with it, and they may have to do it proactively. Now they've got time to wait. And as I've said in columns for several years now. I don't think the problem is that the majority of legislators don't understand that expanded Medicaid would probably be of benefit in Mississippi, particularly to rural hospitals represented by the Hospital Association. The
Right.
problem is retail politics. It's very difficult for the legislature to give something to the public, to voters, and then because of later budget constraints and after those citizens are dependent on it, they have to take it away from them. So I think
Yeah.
that's always been the concern. I think it's still the concern. After the Supreme Court decision, you either make a quick and dirty fix to the INR process, which can be done, fairly easily, or you, as a legislator, you take this voluminous National Conference of State Legislatures report on the INR process nationally, which makes a number of recommendations. The chief among them is don't expand or enhance your ballot initiative statutes. They want to see, instead of ballot initiatives expanded, they want to see this out of the process of amending the Constitution and into the process of implementing or changing statutes, which is
Right.
a whole different process. That was the major objection to the marijuana thing, is we're putting marijuana in the state constitution. So I think you're going to see a lot of reference to this NCSL report. I've had several legislators and former legislators share that with me in recent days. But I also think, as the governor said, there's not going to be a good soft political position for not in some way fixing the initiative process, because back on that same theory, you're taking something away from voters that they have enjoyed in the past. So that's a pretty thin razor's edge to walk, but that's the path that our legislature and particularly our leadership has on that. I don't think you're going to see Medicaid expanded by that process anytime soon, but depending on what the fix is for INR, you may see it come at a later date. It may be more difficult than it would have been for the pro-expansion forces, but I think there will still be a path, albeit rocky, to put that back before the voters.
Yeah. So if you had to handicap it, Sid, what do you think about the governor calling a special session to address either the ballot initiative process, which is clearly broken, medical marijuana, or both?
I think that, like most governors, a special session won't be called until he feels relatively sure of the outcome, so that there are no surprises. And I don't think that Governor Reeves is in that position yet. So I think the odds are that probably through the Neshoba County Fair, we'll still be talking about this as we head into budget season. In the fall, I think the impetus becomes stronger to do something.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I see it as well, and I'm quite sure the governor's counting votes, as they say, trying to see what sort of support there is for both of these matters. And you're not just going to call everybody into the Capitol just to go talk about it, essentially. I don't think, and it's not really in the best interest of the taxpayers either. It needs to be a situation where, as you indicated, he is fairly confident of what the outcome would be before we spend time and money on that. And as you know, there were several other initiatives as well. I think there was one for term limits. I don't know if those got all the way through the certification process, but there was a number of other initiatives as well. And as you indicated, Sid, that I think the concern is by a lot of reasonable thinking people is that we end up embedding that in our Constitution, enshrining it in our Constitution, and it doesn't appear to be a place. How do you feel about an INR process where we could, in fact, establish or amend statute as opposed to just, amend the Constitution?
I think you're going to have voters and citizens groups who don't like it and want to go back to the way it was post Fordyce. But frankly, Mississippians have been fighting about I&R for a century. And, the courts have intervened. I think, doesn't really matter what any of us think about it. It's more politically palatable to go from changing statutes or from changing the Constitution to changing statutes. I think that's got more legs. I think that's got a greater possibility of happening.
And as you are well aware, several states do, in fact, have that. I think in the 2020 presidential election cycle across the country, there were some 1,300 ballot initiatives that voters voted for across the states. Some had several. We had a couple here. And so there's just varying degrees of that.
People get these pet issues. The first time that I covered a term limits fight, I had a full head of hair. It's
that's right. That's been going on a while.
It's been around a while.
You're absolutely right. So let's talk about the recent appointment by the governor of our friend Brad White to serve as the executive director of MDOT. Your thoughts about that?
Well, MDOT's another area I've covered, and I think back, over the last 10, 15 years, all of the controversy with Butch Brown, who had experience as a mayor of Natchez, but not a lot of experience on Capitol Hill, maybe not a great understanding of how we actually finance highway construction in America. Brad brings to the table a significant amount of Capitol Hill experience, serving as chief of staff for 2 senators. He understands how we fund it, a combination of federal and state gas taxes, the Federal Highway Trust Fund, and how all of those parts interlock. He has political credibility, and he has connections with the existing regime and state government. So I think the appointment of Brad White is a home run, not just for this administration, but it's a home run for MDOT as an organization. He has some prior experience there. And, he kind of understands road building from the Simpson County perspective, dealing with boards of supervisors. That's very important. You got a lot of different constituencies statewide dealing with MDOT. A lot of folks to keep happy at the same time. And, the old saying about herding cats, this is like herding herds of cats. So I think Brad brings a lot to the table, and I really don't anticipate any problems for him getting Senate confirmation.
I agree. And Brad, as you know, is a good relationship builder as well. And in terms of the task of herding the herds of cats, that could be a valuable skill. I think I had Commissioner Willie Simmons on that oversees the Central District earlier today and asked him that question as well, his thoughts about Brad, and he was very positive. So they're not in the same party, but it's a good thing to hear that he's optimistic about that appointment and the relationship of certainly his district with the overall MDOT. So we shall see. We got a bunch of money coming down the pike here. $1.8 billion, some of which is going to be carved out to be spent and probably will flow through those various commissioners and their purview. Sid, thanks so much for joining us today. Really enjoyed talking to you, sir. We'll have to do it again.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Sid Salter has been our guest. We shall return. We got a giveaway when we come back on the JT Show.